Imagine this carefully. Your dog is right beside you. Maybe they're sleeping. Maybe they're wagging their tail, waiting for attention. Maybe they're looking at you the way dogs do, completely trusting, completely loyal. Now, imagine something impossible happens. In an instant, they're gone. Not lost, not hiding, but standing completely alone on the surface of the moon. No air to breathe, no sound at all, no warmth, no protection, just silence and space. What would happen to them? Would they panic? Would they try to survive? Or would everything end before they even understood what was happening? Today, we're going to break this down in detail, moment by moment, scientifically and realistically, to answer one question. Could any dog survive on the moon? But before we begin, we are Meme Dogs TV. Subscribe and let's begin. Dogs are not just animals. They're companions, protectors, and in many cases, family. For thousands of years, they've evolved alongside humans. They've adapted to our environments, our routines, even our emotions. Breeds like the German Shepherd are known for intelligence and service. Others, like the Labrador Retriever, are known for loyalty and companionship. And some, like the Siberian Husky, are built to survive extreme cold and harsh terrain. But all of them share one thing in common. They evolved on Earth. They rely on Earth. The air, the pressure, the gravity, the protection of our atmosphere, these are not optional. They are essential. So when we ask if a dog could survive on the moon, we're really asking, what happens when you remove everything life depends on? Let's slow this down and go deeper. The moment a dog is exposed to the moon's surface without protection, the most immediate problem is oxygen. Dogs breathe air just like humans. Oxygen is carried through the bloodstream to fuel every organ in the body, especially the brain. Without oxygen, brain function begins to fail almost immediately. Within the first few seconds, the dog would attempt to inhale, but there would be nothing to take in. This creates instant distress. Within about 5 to 10 seconds, oxygen levels in the blood drop sharply. The brain, which is extremely sensitive to oxygen deprivation, begins to shut down. The dog would likely lose consciousness within roughly 10 to 15 seconds. Importantly, this would happen before many of the other effects fully take place. So while the environment is extremely hostile, the loss of consciousness would come very quickly. Now let's go further. The moon doesn't just lack oxygen, it lacks pressure. This creates a vacuum environment. On Earth, atmospheric pressure keeps liquids in our bodies stable. In a vacuum, that pressure disappears. As a result, gases inside the body begin to expand. This includes air in the lungs and digestive system. At the same time, liquids exposed to low pressure begin to vaporize. This process is called ebulism. Moisture on the dog's tongue, eyes, and respiratory passages would begin to turn into vapor. It wouldn't look dramatic like an explosion, but internally it's extremely damaging. The body would begin to swell slightly as gases expand. Circulation becomes impaired, and all of this is happening silently, without any external sign of what's really going on inside. Now let's examine temperature, one of the most misunderstood dangers. The moon does not have an atmosphere to distribute heat. That means temperature depends entirely on direct sunlight. In areas exposed to the sun, temperatures can reach approximately 127 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than boiling water. In shadowed areas, temperatures can drop to around minus 173 degrees Celsius. That's far colder than any natural environment on Earth. Now think about how dogs regulate temperature. Dogs rely heavily on panting to cool down. They don't sweat like humans. But panting requires air. On the moon, there is no air, so overheating cannot be controlled. At the same time, their fur, no matter how thick, is not designed to handle space-level cold. Even extreme cold weather breeds like the Alaskan Malamute or Siberian Husky are adapted to Earth's atmosphere, not the vacuum of space. This means temperature becomes an uncontrollable threat in both directions. Now let's talk about microgravity and how it affects dogs specifically. Dogs are four-legged animals that rely on balance and coordination tied directly to gravity. Their inner ear, muscles, and joints are all adapted to Earth's gravitational pull. Remove that, and their entire sense of movement changes. In microgravity, a dog would not be able to stand or walk normally. Instead, it would float or drift. This creates confusion and stress. Even trained animals take time to adapt to zero-gravity environments, and even then, movement is unnatural. Over time, microgravity also causes muscle loss and bone density reduction. While this wouldn't be the first issue a dog faces on the moon, it becomes critical for long-term survival. Another major threat is radiation. On Earth, we are protected by two key systems, the atmosphere and the magnetic field. These shield us from harmful radiation coming from the sun and deep space. The moon has neither. This means radiation hits the surface directly. There are two main types, solar radiation from the sun and cosmic radiation from outside the solar system. These forms of radiation can penetrate living tissue. They damage cells and DNA. In the short term, high exposure can cause radiation sickness. In the long term, it increases the risk of cancer and organ failure. For a dog, prolonged exposure without shielding would be fatal. Let's revisit the idea of tough dogs. Breeds like the Siberian Husky, Alaskan Malamute, and German Shepherd are often considered highly resilient, and on Earth, that's true. They can survive cold climates, perform physically demanding tasks, and adapt to challenging environments. But their advantages come from thick fur, strong muscles, and efficient metabolism. None of these solve the core problems of space: lack of oxygen, lack of pressure, exposure to radiation. So while one breed might last a few seconds longer than another, the difference is minimal. The limitation is not the breed. It's the environment itself. Now let's change the scenario completely. What if we provide dogs with the same technology humans use in space? A properly designed system would need to include a pressurized suit to maintain body stability, an oxygen supply for breathing, temperature regulation to handle extremes, and radiation shielding for protection. With these systems, survival becomes possible. In fact, dogs could potentially walk on the moon alongside astronauts, live inside controlled lunar habitats, and adapt to space environments over time. This shifts the question from "can they survive?" to "can we help them survive?" Before humans ever traveled in space, animals were sent first. One of the most famous was Laika. Laika became the first animal to orbit Earth. Her mission proved that a living being could survive launch and exist in space, even if only temporarily. But her story also highlights the risks and ethical questions of sending animals into such environments. Dogs have followed humans everywhere. They've crossed continents, adapted to climates, and stood beside us in our greatest challenges. So, as humanity looks toward returning to the moon and beyond, one question remains. Will dogs follow us there too? And if they do, will it be for survival, exploration, or simply because they trust us enough to go anywhere we go? So, could dogs survive on the moon? Not alone, but with us, that's a different story. Subscribe right now for more crazy dogs in space videos, and I'll see you in the next mission.